Hi, my name is Ray Austin with Austin Air Company. Today's topic is going to be New Air Conditioning Freon Phase Down Part 1. There was recently some amendments made to the Montreal Protocol, and so because Joe Biden has recently become President of the United States, these regulations are likely to take form and pass down to the EPA. So what's going to happen is that the very common refrigerant that's in air conditioners is going to be phased out. Now, there was recently a phase out of R22 Freon here about 10 years ago. R22 is still used in some air conditioners today, and I'm able to repair R22 Freon units as a repair option only. So, but if that piece of equipment needs to be replaced, then you have to go back with the R410. Well, the R410 now is in the sights of the EPA as being phased out. This topic is going to be difficult. It's going to affect everyone in the United States in one way, shape, or form. You got to take a few things into consideration. What I would recommend for my climate may not be suitable for other climates. I live in the Katy, Texas area. I service the Katy, Texas areas and some surrounding areas. And what's unique to my climate is that it's a very hot climate. Just as an example, it's currently like January 24th, 25th, 26th during the filming of this episode that's eventually going to be posted to YouTube. So I recently ran my air conditioning in the evening to just get rid of the humidity. And so you've got to realize that my climate is unique in that air conditioning is very important to this climate. We run our air conditioners probably upwards of 10 months of the year, most years. And so it's a complicated subject, and so that's why I'm going to break these down into parts. I've got an estimate of maybe 25 to 30 minutes in length for this first video. I've got this article that touches on a lot of points, and so rather than just randomly talking about this, that, or the next thing, I felt that it was a better way for approaching this is talking about an article, and I will link to where if you want to read, because I've made some changes to the article, clarified a few things, and so if you want to read that article, you can. There's going to be a link down in the description of this video to where you can go there and you can read the document for yourself. And so with that said, I'm going to get started. We're going to go right into it. Stay tuned. So the name to this article is going to be different than the video topic because that video topic is going to stay the same through all parts, and so but then there's going to be different things that I talk about. So the name of this article is called U.S. Push to Phase Down Global Warming Inducing Refrigerants Blocked by Trump Administration Moves to the States. So when we think about climate change, we usually think about reducing carbon dioxide, CO2 emissions, but other gases also contribute to the problem. Hydrofluorocarbon, HFC refrigerants, which is the refrigerant that we're now using, R410A, is an HFC refrigerant. The previous one was an HCFC refrigerant known as R22 Freon, just for some clarification. The chemicals we use in our air conditioning and refrigeration systems, we used to call them Freon. Well, we still call them Freon today. Are also major climate change contributors. Indeed, refrigerant emissions are rising so rapidly that they threaten to undermine the progress made to mitigate CO2 emissions. The Obama administration recognized the potential climate threat posed by HFCs and advanced several policies to phase down their use. Since Donald Trump's election win in 2016, remember this was 2016, it's now 2021, Joe Biden's president, but this article was written before Joe Biden became president. The administration and its allies blocked those policies either actively or through malign neglect, meaning the Trump administration just ignored them. In response, state governments are stepping up to advance the HFC phase down. Now remember, HFC is the newer refrigerant that we've been using for about the past 20 years. Those efforts appear to be progressing even in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. The domestic air conditioning industry is struggling to manage this expansion of government-induced regulations. Those struggles could well turn into delays for the general public should manufacturers have insufficient time to produce the new refrigerants and equipment the new regulations will require. The industry is imploring the federal government to impose nationwide standards, but so far those pleas have gone unheeded. HFCs go to problem solver to problem causer. The great irony of the HFC emissions problem is that these refrigerants were originally introduced as a solution to a pressing environmental problem, ozone depletion caused by widespread chlorofluorocarbon CFC refrigerant use. Now, one thing to remember is that R22 was an Hfc. It's similar to CFC, but it's not as bad. Currently, we can still repair home air conditioning units that contain R22 Freon. Just realize that cost is driving these phase outs, because the cost of refrigerant keeps going up. The most striking manifestation of this problem is the ozone hole over Antarctica. Over 30 years ago, the Montreal Protocol set a schedule to phase out CFCs as well as HCFCs. It was signed by nearly all the world's countries, and for the most part it worked. The global air conditioning and refrigeration industries now largely use HFCs instead of CFCs and HCFCs, and the ozone hole is healing. The protocol's story would have an unqualified happy ending, except that pound for pound, HFCs are thousands of times more potent contributors to global warming than CO2, otherwise known as carbon dioxide. Also, their emissions are growing rapidly, mostly due to leaks from air conditioners and refrigeration equipment. According to the United Nations Environmental Program, if global HFC emissions continue to grow at their current rate, by the year 2050, they will have the same climate change impact as between 7% to 45% of that year's global CO2 emissions. The actual portion will depend in part on the world's ability to curtail CO2 emissions by then. We could succeed at driving down CO2 emissions, but see that success undermined by HFC emissions growth. The Obama administration takes action. Responding to the threat posed by HFC emissions, the Obama administration advanced two policies. In October 2016, it joined with almost 2 other countries to sign an amendment to the Montreal Protocol. Now, scale back to like 1990, 1991 was when the Montreal Protocol became into being, and that's what phased out the CFCs and the HFC refrigerants of that time period. And so you got to realize that Montreal Protocol has been amended several times. So that's essentially what this was doing. It was going to amend the Montreal Protocol to include HFC refrigerants as another global warming contributing, but it's not on the same page as CFCs and HCFCs because those were ozone depleting. It's just to give you some clarification there. So that amendment phases down the production and consumption of refrigerants that have high potential to contribute to climate change and nearly but not entirely eliminates them. The Kigali Amendment, named for the Rwandan capital in which it was signed, doesn't directly regulate HFCs. Instead, it seeks to reduce the potential that all of the refrigerants produced and used combined have to warm the atmosphere. The amendment calls for countries to phase down climate warming refrigerants in distinct steps, with different schedules for richer and poorer countries. For rich countries like the US, those steps start with a small reduction in 2019 and end up in 2036 with overall refrigerant climate change impact reduced by 85% from where it was in the early 2010s. With the amendment to the Montreal Protocol in mind, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, published new rules, significant new alternative policy, acronyms, SNAP 20, SNAP 21. And so these rules share a similar goal with the Kigali Amendment, reduce refrigerant contribution to climate change, but they take a very different approach. Unlike the amendment, the EPA SNAP rules ban specific refrigerants in specific types of equipment. For example, they disallow the use of the most common HFC refrigerants in chillers. Chillers are equipment that chills water that is typically used to cool large office buildings and factories, and in some situations, schools. Starting on January 1st, 2024, that disallowance applies only to chillers manufactured on or after that date, and already installed equipment wouldn't be affected. The EPA rules also ban the use of other HFC refrigerants used in equipment found in cold storage warehouses, supermarkets, and household refrigerators and freezers. The domestic refrigerant and air conditioning equipment manufacturers immediately supported the Kigali Amendment and the new EPA SNAP rules. Now, why do you think? Why do you think the manufacturers are eager? They're eager to jump on this because they got the ability to sell new equipment now. Oh, well, we're sorry, we can't repair your unit anymore because that refrigerant was banned. You need to go out and buy some more new equipment. So you see where this is heading. Most of the other rich countries that signed the Kigali Amendment quickly codified it into law. Hey, manufacturers are on it. Hey, we'll all jump on it. All that was needed for the phase down to proceed in an orderly manner in the U.S. was for the Senate to ratify the amendment. What one administration can do, another can undo. So far, there's been no Senate ratification vote, and there is unlikely to be one as long as President Trump is in office. Now remember, as I said before, Trump is not in office any longer. Joe Biden is the president of the United States. This article was written before then. This is so it gives you some context so you understand why this is happening. In 2018, the Competitive Enterprise Institute, a conservative think tank, wrote an open letter to then President Donald J. Trump, co-signed by nearly 24 other conservative groups, urging Donald J. Trump to reject this amendment. Now, why do you think? It's there in black and white. The letter writers declared the Kigali Amendment would not advance the purpose of the Montreal Protocol. Now, the purpose of the Montreal Protocol was to phase out ozone-destroying substances. That's what the purpose was. But would instead turn a treaty aimed at saving the ozone layer into a global warming treaty. With those words, the leaders of the conservative movement drew a line in the ever-warming sand that the Trump administration and its allies in the Senate are unlikely to cross. That was then, this is now. Joe Biden is the President of the United States. Obama-era HFC regulation took another body blow in August 2017 when the U.S. Appeals Court for the District of Columbia ruled that Congress was only granted the EPA authority to regulate ozone-depleting refrigerants, not global warming-inducing refrigerants. The decision, authored by none other than Brett Kavanaugh, a year before his elevation to the U.S. Supreme Court, somehow ignored a NASA study released 2 years earlier that concluded that HFCs actually do deplete the ozone layer. But there's some irony there, because if you go to the EPA website, and I'll post the proof in this video, I'll put up a graphic to show you. The EPA says R410A is safe against the ozone layer. So with that said, it also noted that depletion is much smaller than that associated with CFCs and HFCs they replaced, but it is not zero. Well, the thing is, you got to realize we're still using R22 refrigerants to repair older equipment. So how are you going to ascertain whether this substance is coming from older air conditioners that are still out there in existence, or whether this is the new refrigerant? There's no way for them to know, in my opinion. Ultimately, based on Kavanaugh's opinion, nearly all of the EPA's rules for disallowing HFCs were vacated. That was then, this is now. Ironically, there is a lack of this information on the EPA's website. They claim HFCs to be ozone layer friendly. If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, well, or if you prefer, liar, liar, pants on fire. Come on, man. Some choice states stepped up to pass their own HFC regulations. When it became apparent that New Year's Day 2019, the scheduled start date for the reductions mandated by the Kigali Amendment, was going to pass without the federal government taking action, state governors began to step up. First, in September 2018, California Governor Jerry Brown signed into law the California Cooling Act, which was principally based on the EPA rules the U.S. Appeals Court had vacated, SNAP 20 and SNAP 21. Washington, Vermont, and New Jersey followed soon afterwards, and more states jumped on the bandwagon. Currently, 4 states have enacted regulations based on the EPA SNAP rules. 3 more are close but delayed by the pandemic, and 8 more are at some point in the legislative development process. Many of these states are not letting the pandemic slow them down. For example, Colorado is holding hearings as planned regarding its proposed regulation, eliminating a dominant category of refrigerants and replacing it with new climate-friendly, now R410A was deemed climate-friendly. And now all of a sudden, it's no longer not climate-friendly. How ironic. Eliminating a dominant category of refrigerants and replacing it with new climate-friendly alternatives, including new equipment designed to use those alternatives, represents a major technological change. A sane person would say, but I thought R410A was climate-friendly. That was then, 20 years ago. This is now. Ideally, a nation wouldn't make such a change on a state-by-state basis. For example, it puts a lot of stress on refrigerant and equipment manufacturers who are seeing their domestic market break down into at least 2 sub-markets. States that adopt the EPA SNAP rules and all the other states. Furthermore, the states adopting the EPA SNAP rules are not doing so completely uniformly. There are a few subtle differences between some of the new state regulations. Guess what? The manufacturers aren't going to play that game. They're going to make the equipment they're going to make, and they're going to apply it to everybody because it's too costly to do it any other way. So essentially, even if Trump wouldn't have been reelected, about the only way they could have stopped it is sue all these other states. So, where it goes, no one knows at this point. But, with the Biden administration, everything's going to progress right along. This is back page news. I mean, you're not gonna see or hear this until it's already been done. That domestic market confusion makes things difficult for manufacturers and distributors. What sorts of air conditioning and refrigeration systems should they be developing, testing, manufacturing, and shipping to market? No one knows. Which refrigerants should those systems contain? No one knows. It's not a matter of just taking a system and charging it up with whatever refrigerant a given state requires on a given day. Lots of new climate-friendly refrigerants require specialized equipment designs, and manufacturers typically need years to design, test, and train contractors for new products. The industry's problems could eventually become problems for the general population. That means you. It's your problem. Not my problem. It's your problem. You want to know why? You voted for it. With so much uncertainty, the risk grows that building managers and builders in some states will encounter much longer than usual waits to get new equipment installed or replaced. That spells trouble for a state like Texas that really depends on air conditioning. So the HVAC industry demands federal action. Given all the uncertainty state-by-state refrigeration regulation represents for refrigerant and air conditioning manufacturers, it's not surprising they're looking to the federal government to impose nationwide regulations. According to a recent message from Stephen Urich, the president and CEO of the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute, commonly used with an acronym as AHRI, they typically test and rate efficiency of air conditioning systems and various configurations of such, and apply the ratings of the efficiency to those configurations. So he basically goes on to say the HVAC industry needs congressional action on HFCs now more than ever. There's currently a bipartisan bill up for consideration in the U.S. Congress, the American Innovation and Manufacturing Act, otherwise known as the AIM Act, which would codify parts of the Kigali Amendment into U.S. law. With the pandemic and the election distracting legislators and Trump still in the White House, remember this was back when Trump was president. He's not president right now. This article was written before Joe Biden became president. When will the federal government take action and impose nationwide rules? Joe Biden's president. It's coming. It's coming. Wait for it. HFC regulations aren't the only climate change mitigation policies to fall by the wayside during the Trump years. Other examples include the Paris Agreement and automobile fuel economy standards. It's going to come down to the voters this November. It has. They voted, Joe Biden is president, to decide whether or not the next federal government supports a wide variety of climate policies, including the HFC phase down, which is R410A. R410A is a part of it. There's many others that are included in that. The U.S. Climate Alliance provides support to state governors advancing climate change mitigation policies. Governors from 24 states are members. So far, 4 have implemented HFC regulations and another 11 are considering proposed regulations. I will post a graphic of the map of the states of the governors that have taken matters into their own hands at the state level. So what say you? What do you think? What do you think about all this? How is it going to affect you? Leave your opinion in the comment section below. Remember, this is a family channel. Please keep it clean. There is no reason to act like 2-year-olds, even if the U.S. government does this. There's no reason to act like kids. You know, we can talk as grown-ups. Share this video. In the very soon future, this topic is going to be hot. Tempers are going to flare. Blood is going to boil. It's a given. Thank you for watching the video. I really appreciate it. Share this video with your friends and family and get the word out there, because this is going to be a topic for the ages, because there's been a number of change outs already to R410A. And so they're going to say, what do you mean R410A is phased out? You said this refrigerant was environmentally friendly. What do you mean it's no longer available? And you got to realize that in the next part, I'm going to discuss potential disruptions. My name is Ray Austin. I own and operate Austin Air Company, a small HVAC company located in Katy, Texas. I service Katy, Texas and some surrounding areas. If you have a need for air conditioning and you live in the Katy, Texas area, you can call me at 832-475-6895. Or if you need some more information, you can always visit me on my main website at www.austinairco.com. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.
The manufacturers lied, the EPA lied. Want to buy another new air conditioner?